CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Polls have closed in Greece's parliamentary elections. The recent rail disaster and the high cost of living, key issues at the ballot box. Russia claims victory in the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. President Zelensky disputes this, but says the city is completely destroyed. And thousands displaced and billions of euros in damages. Italy counts the cost after devastating floods that killed 14 people. Well, the polls have now closed in Greece's general election, where the high cost of living has been a major factor for voters. The incumbent Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, of the centre-right New Democracy Party, is seeking re-election. His main rival is his predecessor, Alexis Tsipras, from the left-wing Syriza party, which ruled between 2015 and 2019. It's likely that neither party will win an outright majority, meaning a second vote could take place in July. Our correspondent, Evangelos Tsipras, is live in Athens for us now. So voting has finished, Evangelo, and I understand that we may have the first official exit poll.
That's right. I'm standing here at the New Democracy headquarters party. Just a few seconds ago, we got the first exit polls, and it shows that the Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, and leader of the New Democracy Party, got 40% of the vote, way higher than what was forecasted a few weeks ago or a few days ago. Now his the second party, Syriza party, with the leader of Alexis Tsipras, got about 29%, double-digit different. No one was expecting that to happen. We still have more ballots that come out. These are now, of course, ones that have come out from the local and domestic TV stations. The official counting of the votes will come out from the Foreign Ministry at about an hour and a half from now. But what, as everything seems like, that would be between the 36 to 40%. So again, the Greek Prime Minister is leading again the race with these polls that have come out with 40%. Now, of course, that doesn't make him the majority, as he needed 45% to form a majority. But he will be perhaps going into a second round of elections, seeking again the vote from the Greek people.
Now, of course, Evangelo, it's not just the economy that voters are concerned about. The terrible rail disaster in February, people also thinking about that.
That's true. And we did see that did have an effect on the Greek Prime Minister's popularity. Unlike the wiretapping scandal that almost had not even half of a point dent in his image, the train crash in Tebe that happened in February that cost the life of 57 people did make him drop about 4 to 5 percentage points in popularity. Now, the Syriza party and the PASOK party, the two opponents of the Greek Prime Minister, the New Democracy Party, capitalized during their campaign on that. And that's where the Greek Prime Minister did have an issue when it was coming to the final vote. But it seems like a lot of the people, when they went to cast their ballots, they didn't really have that much on mind rather than the economy. Of course, the country is having issues with high food prices, but at the moment, he did drop the unemployment rate, and he did bring out the country into the investment grade. So that's what most of the people had in mind, and they're wishing that to continue, and that's what it seems like that why they voted for the Greek Prime Minister. But as we said earlier, a majority won't be formed, and we'll be going to second elections sometime in the summer.
Okay, Evangelo, thank you very much for that. Well, Kostas Lapavitsas is a professor of economics at the University of London's School of Oriental and African Studies. He's also a former member of the Syriza party. Thank you so much for joining us on CGTN this evening, sir. If I could maybe get your reaction first to this poll that's just come out, this exit poll that suggests that the New Democracy Party of Prime Minister Mitsotakis has done much better than expected.
It is hard to believe, actually. I'm not sure that it's going to be that way. Exit polls are notorious for being misleading. My experience during this campaign has been that it is much closer than that. But then again, you never know. Once the votes are cast, their caste. So, but it is hard to believe that the difference is as great as that. Let us wait a little bit longer. Let us wait until the night is well in its way, so we will have a better idea then.
Certainly, it is early days indeed. You're joining us from Thessaloniki, where, of course, the train that was involved in that terrible disaster in February was headed. What was the atmosphere like around the voting today?
Actually, this is a very important point. I heard your correspondent from Athens a few minutes ago. The railway accident was an enormous blow at the time. Millions of people protested. But as the electoral campaign unfolded, it played less and less of a role. And that is indicative of how Greek people have been approaching this election. A big shock, the railway accident, tens of people died. But people were swayed more by what they thought would happen to the economy, what the leading parties would do to deal with the economic situation. That seemed to have been the main thing, not the state of the railway system and what that reveals about how Greek public mechanisms work.
Mm-hmm. So the economy front and centre, as does tend to be the case with big elections like this and with so many problems people are experiencing. Greece's economy, though, is recovering from those dark days when the bailout was necessary, but ordinary voters seem to want more from their leaders. What kind of choices have been laid before them during this election?
Well, the remarkable thing about this election has been that the choices laid in front of the electorate were not that different. The government played the tune of success, that we've stabilized the economy, we've turned the corner, now give us your vote, trust us, take you to onward and upward, to the high uplands. It seemed to have worked to a certain extent. What they promised was basically more foreign direct investment, repair the health system, possibly reduce some taxes and so on. The main opposition party, Syriza, didn't really differ in any structural way in terms of what they proposed to the electorate, but they made a lot of noise about the pressures on working people because of the inflation rates and all the post-COVID impact on living standards. And they promised tax cuts and possibly increasing wages and so on. They don't seem to have had that much success with that. But if you look at both parties, it's quite similar. It's quite similar in terms of what they proposed, and that's not surprising because both parties essentially accept the broad framework within which the Greek economy operates, which is the framework worked out last decade, the framework post-bailouts. The main parties of Greek politics accept that framework and operate within it. So it's not surprising that in terms of what they proposed to the Greek people, there wasn't really that much between them. It seems that has benefited most.
Sorry to interrupt you. Isn't it the case, though, that Greece's main political parties across the spectrum are dominated by these family dynasties? And is there some sort of deeper malaise amid the electorate being reflected in the potential lack of a clear winning result?
Well, Greece suffers from all kinds of problems, deep problems, and yet another aspect of this election is that these problems were not at the forefront. Of course, Greek politics is dominated by established families, usually well-off, well-connected, and they produce various politicians, men and women, and dominate leading positions and so on, and that is not a good thing for democracy, obviously. That goes together with deep structural problems for the country, because as I said to you a minute ago, the post-bailout framework is accepted by all, but that post-bailout framework is not really particularly conducive to growth, I have to say. Greece suffers from low investment, very low investment, only 14% of GDP, very, very low investment, low savings, difficulty in competing internationally. It's not easy to see how the country will indeed enter a high growth period ahead. It looks like growth is possibly around 2% at best in the next few years. And don't forget, the GDP of the country right now is 20% lower than it was when the country was hit by the crisis 12 years ago. It still is a much poorer country. So instead of debating what to do about the weaknesses of the Greek economy, the underlying weaknesses, the main parties debated the things that I mentioned to you before, a little bit more tax cuts and so on. That is not a good sign for how the country will move ahead. It's a very worrying thing. Mm-hmm. The country needs a proper political debate and shake-up, it seems to me.
OK, well, it's really good to get your thoughts on this. Much appreciated. Kostas Lapovitsas from SOAS in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has insisted that Ukrainian troops still hold parts of the eastern city of Bakhmut. This is despite claims from Russia's mercenary Wagner Group that they have taken the area. At an earlier meeting with US President Joe Biden at the G7 summit in Japan, Zelensky appeared to concede that the city had been lost. Louise Greenwood has more.
Jubilant fighters from the Wagner Group of mercenaries raising the Russian flag over Bakhmut on Sunday. With conflicting reports coming from the ground, it's pictures like these that have raised questions over whether the city may have finally fallen to Moscow's control after months of fierce fighting.
For 224 days, our guys stormed this city. The only fighters here were the Wagner mercenary group. We fought not only the Ukrainian army here, we also fought the Russian bureaucracy that put sticks in our wheels.
But speaking at the G7 meeting in Hiroshima, Zelensky insisted that Bakhmut remains in the hands of his troops, even as he said the city is almost completely destroyed.
Today they fulfill a very important task. They are in Bakhmut as of today. In which locations exactly, I won't tell you, but this means that Bakhmut is not conquered by the Russian Federation of today. There can't be any other interpretation of this.
Zelensky's claims have been backed up by units on the ground.
Everything that the heroes of Bakhmut have done to destroy the Wagner Group will have been worth it in the future, when our units that have trained abroad and in the Ukraine will get battle ready and kick the demoralized and unfit enemy out of our country.
President Putin has congratulated the Wagner Group, but says the victory could not have occurred without the support of regular Russian forces. But the battle for Bakhmut has caused a bitter war of words between the Wagner Group's Yevgeny Prigozhin and Moscow defense chiefs, who he claims failed to support his fighters with the necessary military hardware. The claims and counterclaims come as the G7 summit in Japan is ending, with a pledge of more military aid to Ukraine from some of the world's richest nations, including a new $375 million support package from the US.
And today I'm announcing the next tranche of U.S. security assistance to Ukraine, a package that includes more ammunition, artillery, armored vehicles to bolster Ukraine's battlefield abilities. And the United States continues to help Ukraine respond, recover, and rebuild.
US President Joe Biden also saying that President Putin would not break the resolve of Kyiv's allies. The message from Kyiv supporters is that even if Bakhmut is lost, the fight for Ukraine is far from over. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
Warring factions in Sudan have agreed to a 7-day humanitarian ceasefire to begin on Monday. The truce, brokered by intermediaries from the US and Saudi Arabia, calls for humanitarian aid and the restoration of essential services. While previous ceasefires have failed, a statement said this one will be closely monitored. The Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces have been fighting for control of the country for the past 5 weeks. And this is CGTN still to come. 14 people dead, thousands displaced and billions of euros in damages. We're in Italy as the country comes to terms with devastating floods.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Hi there, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Exit polls in Greece's parliamentary elections show that Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis' Conservative Party is in the lead, but unlikely to win enough seats in Parliament to form a government outright. Russia claims victory in the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. President Zelensky disputes this, but says the city is completely destroyed. Rescue crews are evacuating stranded residents in Italy's northeast region after floods ravaged the area, killing 14 people and leaving swathes of farmland underwater. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, left the Group of Seven meeting in Japan a day earlier than scheduled to deal with the emergency. Torrential rains have caused billions of dollars worth of damage and made thousands of people homeless. Let's talk to our correspondent Alex Fraser, who is in the affected region. Alex, we can see those floodwaters there behind you. What is the latest?
So, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni returned to Italy from the G7 meeting today. She came straight here to Ravenna, one of the worst affected parts of Emilia-Romagna province. She went and met with some of the people who were victims of this flood, and I've been around the city today and the nearby city of Cesena, where there is a huge clean-up operation going. I mean, you might see that it's sunny here and it hasn't rained since yesterday, but there are still really, really deep waters. Many people have lost. Around 36,000 people displaced in this region, and this is one of the major agricultural hearts of Italy, and as such, much farmland and food and agriculture will have been destroyed. Currently, there is a search and rescue region a lot.
Apologies, we're losing our connection there to Alex Fraser in Italy.
Water across this afternoon.
Sorry, Alex, do carry on. We've had a bit of interruption on the line, but it seems to have re-established. Do carry on.
No, and they've been pumping throughout all our in Ravenna, but
I think we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. We'll see if we can re-establish that connection to Alex Fraser there in northern Italy. At least 12 people have died during a crash at a soccer stadium in El Salvador. Play was suspended at the Cuscatlan Stadium when a large number of fans reportedly tried to enter the gates after they'd been closed. Authorities say some may have been sold fake tickets. Around 90 people are being treated for injuries. All football matches were suspended on Sunday following the incident. British novelist Martin Amis, one of the most celebrated authors of his generation, has died at the age of 73. Amis authored 15 novels and several non-fiction books. He's best known for his 1984 novel Money and London Fields in 1989. His novels were often known for their black comedy and satire. Fellow novelist Sir Kazuo Ishiguro described Amis as a standard-bearer for his generation. He died at his Florida home after suffering with esophageal cancer. China is reporting a drop of around 50% in the number of couples applying to get married. May the 20th is usually a peak time for weddings, as the month and day sounds similar to the phrase "I love you" in Mandarin. However, many highly populated provinces like Guizhou, Fujian and Guangdong say the number of new registrations has shrunk to around half of those last year. It comes as China faces a population challenge, including a falling birth rate. Meanwhile, the number of people getting married in Hungary has plunged to a 9-year low, as many couples struggle to afford to tie the knot. Inflation is running above 25%, which is the highest in the EU. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
Juliana Borse and Balázs Gerlics are planning to spend the rest of their lives together. They are counting down the days until their wedding at the end of May. But since their engagement, they've had to make some hard choices about their big day.
A wedding dress starts at somewhere around 500 euros, going up all the way to 3,000 and beyond euros, which for an average Hungarian person is too much. So I said to myself that if I can make the dress of my dreams on my own, then why not? Like I will save thousands of euros, as I said.
The couple says they're trying to trim as much as possible from their original wedding budget, but they are still 50% over.
We started to negotiate with us that how we can shrink, everything into the original budget, and then on some point we said that okay, but we want a good wedding, so we have to extend that budget as well.
Hungary's year-on-year inflation is 25.2%, the highest in nearly 3 decades. Wedding industry insiders say the rising costs are to blame for the sharpest decline in weddings since 2014, with only 1,230 marriages recorded since the beginning of this year.
The wedding venues are in the worst situation because the ingredients and everything, the energy prices, they increase, and they cannot tell now what prices they gonna work, let's say, in September.
The wedding market crash is hurting providers trying to recover from the slowdown during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Couples walking down the aisle this year are trying to save money wherever they can. Some are cutting back on the music. Others are inviting less guests to their wedding, and many others are just canceling until the economy gets better.
Wedding planners say they are having difficult conversations with their clients.
I have a hard time quoting the cost of a wedding for my clients. Catering companies and venues keep raising their prices. All I can do is ask couples to be patient.
Wedding gown makers are also pinning back their expectations because of rising prices.
We've seen less customers this year. Brides are searching for bargains and less elaborate wedding gowns.
Wedding event venues face a choice: to raise prices to adjust for inflation or to keep them low to try and retain customers.
We haven't lost revenue so far. If we raised our prices, I think we would lose money because we would have fewer bookings.
Despite it all, Julie and Balázs believe that love in a time of inflation will prevail. In Budapest, Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN.
Rehabilitation International is one of the biggest disability rights organisations in the world. It celebrated its centenary on Sunday in Beijing, where it received a warm message from China's President Xi Jinping. Hua Yue has more.
Founded in 1922, Rehabilitation International celebrates its 100th anniversary in Beijing this year. A school in France, a non-profit providing social services in Macau, and the Special Olympics International were all awarded by the organization on Sunday evening. At the opening ceremony, the organization released its centennial declaration, calling on the international community to pay greater attention to issues concerning people with disabilities, who represent 15% of the global population. The declaration will be submitted to the President of the General Assembly and the Secretary General of the United Nations. Chinese President Xi Jinping has congratulated the organization on its centennial. In a letter, he extended greetings to all persons with disabilities, as well as the dedicated personnel who support them, as the celebration on Sunday coincided with China's National Disability Day. Representatives from Rehabilitation International and the Special Olympics expressed their appreciation to China's Disabled Persons Federation, or CDPF, for their contributions.
I think that they have moved very fast, given the size of the country and the fact that in the late 80s and through the 90s and now up to 2023, they have greatly expanded CDPF, and they have reached millions, probably, of people with disabilities. And I think they have a deep commitment to doing a fine job and reaching everybody through CDPF.
I'm so excited about our partnership that China has joined the Special Olympics Global Coalition to make inclusive education a reality across the country. We've set a goal of 2,000 schools and 2,000 community centers to reach over 500,000 children with and without intellectual disabilities, to bring them together in a new form of Special Olympics, unified sports. And this is the new frontier.
Latest data shows China now has 85 million disabled people, and as of last year, about 9 million registered persons with disabilities had found jobs. China says it will continue to improve services, as no one should be left behind on the country's journey to common prosperity. Wang Yue, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, we're going to go back to our story about those terrible floods in northern Italy and rejoin our correspondent, Alex Fraser. Alex, you were telling us about the latest on the flood situation there. Perhaps you could bring us up to date on the recovery efforts.
There's a huge clean-up operation underway at the moment, and what is heartening for a lot of local people is there are loads of volunteers as well as the professional emergency services. There's around 5,000 people across the region helping out in any way they can. We've seen lines today of people moving mud out from basements that were completely flooded and trying to do whatever they could to help their neighbours. Now there are a number of people that are still in stranded type conditions in some of the smaller, harder to reach towns, and there are still really deep floodwaters in parts of this region, and it would be very worrying for farmers, those who work in the agricultural sector, and many businesses too. At the moment it's still a red alert here weather-wise, but the real big risk is the chance of potential landslides, which obviously cut off residents in the towns and also can be dangerous. And just to recap, 36,000 people are currently stranded from their homes, and they're staying in museums and shelters, and 14 people, unfortunately, have died in these floods.
Alex Fraser in Ravenna in Italy, thank you very much for that. And our top stories again here on CGTN. Exit polls in Greece's elections show the Conservative New Democracy Party of Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis is leading over the leftist Syriza party. Vote counting continues. Russia claims victory in the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. President Zelensky disputes this, but says the city is completely destroyed. And thousands displaced and billions of euros in damages. Italy counts the cost after devastating floods that killed 14 people. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or you can scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. The latest news will be at the top of this hour. Coming up next, though, it's Razor. For now, from all the team in London, bye for now.